Hi everyone, welcome to another DSLayer podcast. It's great to be with you again. I'm Josh Fletcher, and tonight we're joined by Bonnie Brown, Derek Laranka, and Timo Elliott. Hi everyone.
Morning.
Hey.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about Business Intelligence Competency Centers, or BI Centers of Excellence, or Analytics Centers of Excellence, or whatever they're called now, and really just share some kind of lessons from each of our perspective. So maybe we'll get everyone to introduce themselves and their experience in BICC. So maybe Bonnie, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'm the Solutions Director for Data Visualization for EV Technologies, and I've been working with the BI for a very long time, more than I'd like to admit. But most of my experience has been either working in the BICCs or running BICCs. So I have a lot of experience doing that, good and bad, I guess.
Right, look forward to hearing about it. What about yourself, Derek?
So, Derek Laranka, I am the lead for a BI Center of Excellence at a Fortune 50 insurance and managed healthcare company. I've been doing this now, BICOE, for 6+ years. I've been the lead of our BICOE for the last 2.5 to 3. So small team BICOE as opposed to big team BICC. So it's something I'm definitely passionate about and I like doing. So it's always a fun thing to do. So count me in on this discussion.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. And Timo.
Hello, everyone. So I'm an innovation evangelist with SAP, and I started my career creating reports at Shell in New Zealand. And then for the last 25 years or so, I've been working with BI Competency Centers around the world on best practice.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And for myself, so I've been a business objects consultant for probably actually coming up nearly 15 years now. But in the past 3 years, I've been one of the lead architects in a business intelligence competency center where we stood it up from nothing, and now we've been running it for a couple of years. And that's for a global resources company. And so I'm kind of very fresh on the journey, and also had a couple of not so good experiences in previous kind of consulting roles as well that I'm looking forward to sharing. So yeah, great. Good to have everyone involved. So first of all, we wanted to start maybe with a couple of horror stories, or some good stories. If you don't have any horror stories, maybe you've got some real gems to share. So who wants to kind of kick us off with maybe some lessons learned about what not to do with BICCs?
Everybody jump at once. Okay, I'll go.
Right.
So I think one of the things I've seen a lot, and I don't know if it's really one story, but where everything is an exception to what you've tried to establish with your BICC. And so it's kind of like highlighting every page in the book. Nothing stands out anymore once you start doing that. So I've seen that a lot, where they put in all these great rules and tried to establish a practice and then made everything an exception. So nothing actually follows the best practices that you've established. So definitely seen that a lot. And so, it's that fine line of knowing how to establish guidelines versus rules, and being able to come up with that right mix to make your BIC actually work and not be this exception-driven process.
Yeah, I guess it's knowing when to bend the rules, but they should always be the exception, right? You shouldn't be bending the rules every week because the guidelines never work.
Exactly, especially with I find that when people put in migrations into their process, and they try to set up this very strict, big migration, has to have all these approvals, and then all of a sudden everything is an immediate emergency migration, and you kind of losing control of your environment that way.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've certainly seen a lot of BI competency centers that were set up like IT infrastructure competency centers. So very sort of old school, IT does everything, long, very unagile planning processes. And the reality, what actually happened was that people started doing BI completely separate from the BI Competency Center. They would basically go to the BI Competency Center to get a big dump of their data into Excel or into a separate database, and then all of the real BI would be happening somewhere else. And the biggest problem with that is sometimes the people doing that weren't even aware of the problems. They thought they were doing just fine. story from Velux, the people that make the windows and skylights. They thought they had a perfect BI Competency Center, and they did an external audit of their users. They actually got an outside company to come in and quiz the people who are supposed to be using the BI. And then they realized that they were actually completely out of touch, that people had actually gone out and bought lots of other BI tools and they were completely unaware of what was going on. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, I think that's a common practice too, is where the business goes out and buys tools outside of your BICC, and then all of a sudden they want you to be responsible for it. So that's always fun too. Or where did this data come from?
Yeah,
the number one demand is always, how can we take that data and put it into Excel? That's scary.
Yeah, or why won't it fit into Excel? Because you're trying to take a million times 10 million rows, columns wide and a billion rows long, and put into Excel. So no, that's why it doesn't go into Excel. And in the same respect that Bonnie just said, and Timo talked about, we have the same, I won't call it an issue, but it's the same type of, the business either isn't happy with the tool itself, and would shut up a whole shadow IT organization to support their BI, rather than knocking on our door, even though my team is small, to say, we need this tool in-house. Can you work with architecture to get it in-house? We really like this tool. Instead, they're out there loading stuff up to the cloud until, governance finds out and squashes it. When data governance finds out that you're taking data and loading it up to the public cloud in our type of world, they don't like that very much. So the problem is that we don't want to be seen, BICOEs and CCs can't be seen as the roadblock. They need to be seen as the enabler, even if it's for a new tool.
That's always a big problem. Yeah, the business people have learned that IT is there to say no.
Mm.
Yeah,
it's a very fine line to tread between enabling, but not enabling the wrong behaviour. One of the really bad decisions I saw made in a previous role was where they had an external consulting company come in and basically write them a roadmap. And one of the things they did is decide to throw out all of the existing investment, all of the existing software, data warehouse design, everything, and start completely from scratch. But what they designed was completely over-engineered. There was no skills in the local market for that type of software that they wanted to implement, but it aligned with their global standard. And so it took them a good 18 months to 2 years to actually spin up and actually start to be productive with this BICC, because they had to start from zero. And I think that's one of the things I saw, even though we're all kind of work with SAP software. One of the biggest things I would see with a BICC, if you're starting from scratch, is to look at what tools you have available and use whatever you have, unless it's really, really bad, unless it's Access databases. But you can normally make most things work. It's less about the software and more about the processes and the people that you involve in actually supporting the BICCs.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've seen lots and lots of BI standardization projects as people try and get their hands around all of the different tools in the company. And it's never about getting rid of all of the different types of software. It's all about being pragmatic. And almost inevitably, people end up working with the software they already have and just trying to cut down the number of tools they have and make sure that they're actually supporting a variety of different needs.
I think it's that big bang approach that usually gets people in trouble too, where you try to change everything all at once instead of, being successful in a small amount and then starting to grow from there, where they think they have to reset all the rules right now. And then it takes them so long to do that the business has gone off and done something else at this point because they can't wait.
Yeah, or it's right tool, right job. That's the other thing. We have lots of users who think they want visualization and analytics. In reality, they don't really want to leave their comfort zone. They want just prettier charts. Or you have folks who really have a need for an analytics and data science type tool, but their cost center either can't pay for it or they just don't know what they want. So it's that engagement and collaboration that is the only thing that's going to save everybody's hide nowadays. You let them go off and do their thing, they're going to go out and buy some weird tool that they saw on the internet that does a little bit of what they want. And therefore, there's no standardization. There's no they're having to download all the data into Excel and then put it into their tool. It's a cluster, for lack of a better term. So it's all a matter of how you can coach them to pick that right tool for that right job, even though the tool may not be what they think they want until they realize they see it. I find that my business people have no idea what any of the tools can do until they're shown.
To be fair, though, I think historically IT has, it's a balancing act between agility and governance. And I think the jury is still out, but it seems to be clear that IT in general comes down too hard on the governance and not enough on the agility. And that's one of the big changes of the last 4 or 5 years, is there's been a big sway towards more self-service or self-discovery or lessening some of the rules, because agility just got so much more important. According to Gartner, BICCs are dead because of that.
So that's why maybe it's a COE as opposed to a CC anymore, because you're not competency center, you're a center of excellence now. So, I mean, and that's exactly what I went through, Timo. You said what you just described was exactly what I've lived the last 4 years. We went from a large staff BICC, BICOE with the infrastructure people in the group, individual products, subject matter experts, the whole 9 yards, to a completely distributed, completely platform agnostic center of excellence. My job is moved from use this tool to how do you use this tool? Is that tool the right one? It's enablement. Maybe this tool isn't the right one. My COE isn't just SAP. We have Microsoft now. So the Microsoft suite of Power BI Desktop and those other tools. It's moved out of just being a single stack. You have to use this tool or else, like you just described. It's now self-service. Training is now delivered self-service. We give them links to online training. We give them links to instructor-led training that they can pay for. It's got to be self-service now, because that's what they expect. They're expecting that Agile methodology, not necessarily the Agile methodology that you buy, but they're expecting that. They're not expecting me to be telling them, do this now. They're done with that, and you're completely right.
The analogy I sometimes use is that people used to be pilots, and now they've changed to be air traffic controllers. So we're letting the business people fly the planes. Our job is to stop them crashing into each other and providing good airports, so they have all the facilities they need to fly efficiently from place to place.
Oh, that's cool. It's going to sound strange, but I think of it more as like my yoga practice, that BICC should be more like a practice and less about the rules and structure are all things that you need from a data perspective, but you have to continue to practice and grow with that. And I think that's what happens is a lot of people get static and stuck with that tool selection, and that's the only thing that you're there for. You're more like an internal consultant helping to build like what's your report development cycle and how are you using your data, and it's more like an educational role and a consultative role internally than it is about being the rule setter. And I think that's kind of what Derek was saying too. But I always think of it as more of a practice.
That's exactly.
I actually have a question for you guys, because the one thing that I've seen over the years is I've seen lots of BI competency centers come and go. They go through this phase where they're successful and everything goes fine, and then there's a change in the business, and then it goes away again. So I've seen the same company have a BI competency center, seen it die, seen it come back, seen it die. Is there any way that you know of to avoid that cycle, or is it inevitable?
I think it keeps coming because people do it as part of a project. That they're installing a BICC as part of a project, and then it doesn't live on past the project. That it serves a purpose during an upgrade or something like that. Like I've seen people do a global SAP upgrade and they add a BICC as part of that process because they have to do something with reporting. But when that project dies, then the BICC dies with it. And that's where I think the practice comes into play too. It has to be part of your everyday life. And
I've certainly seen that. And then 5 years later, people realize that there's lots of new employees. They don't know how to use the software, and the software itself is outdated. So the people are seeing other people doing other cool stuff that they don't have. So they start getting dissatisfied. And then the other one is corporate politics. There's a big corporate restructure, and there's this group of people that look like they're just overhead or ivory tower. What are you guys doing again? And so that part of the budget gets cut, and they have to start again from scratch.
I know
think you just described my life. You literally did. Like I said, when I was originally that larger BICOE, now it's just me and another half-time resource. We went from 13 people to 1.5 people. So it's the positive to that is that it forced us to move to self-service and enable, enablement and engagement into a consultative role as opposed to an instructive role or an authoritarian role. But I think the one thing was that we have at my company, we have a Center of Excellence team that has, the way we're looking at Center of Excellence is the same type of way, consultative, be the third line of support for, this is really, really broken. These guys are the experts. They may have an answer, if not, they know how to talk to the vendor. So there's a group of centers of excellence that we all band together, Java, .NET, in the development world. And BI just happens to be there. We're business-wide. We're just happen to be supported out of a larger Center of Excellence organization. So at least headcount-wise, we're not shielded from the politics, Lord knows, and the budget cuts, but we've at least seen the value of having these centers of excellence. So the businesses come to rely on it being there. And they ask, when things go sour, they do ask, why isn't there staffing there? So we have some positives there. But in reality, I really think that it's really cool that there's a Center of Excellence team and other Center of Excellence. The theory is not just a BI COE, and a COE at least exists in multiple products. So, but, Timo, you nailed it again with it's budget cut season.
So, but Derek, now that you're doing the job of 5 people, you get 5 times the pay, right?
I could only wish. I'd love 5 times the time off. I mean, they can give me more days off. That's fine. I don't see them raising pay anytime soon.
I think, so I was going to, share my experience. I mentioned the project I was on a while back, and they were a really good example where they actually stood up this project to create the BICC. They decided to throw out all the software. I left after 6 months. I couldn't stand the politics, and it was just headed south quickly. But I kind of kept in touch with some of the people I worked with, and I think it was a multi-million-dollar project to stand up a BICC, and then after about 3 years, they effectively fired most of the team, outsourced it all offshore, and really didn't really get the outcomes they wanted. But to contrast where I am now, we were the kind of a couple of iterations of trying to stand up a BICC in. And when we started, we had very outdated software, and there was a budget allocated to stand up a project. But I think the difference was we partnered with a very kind of strategic part of the business to deliver outcomes for them, and that was very visible to the organization. And we effectively enabled them to kind of lead the charge and put BI at the center of a lot of what the management saw operationally. So it wasn't aligned to kind of like a corporate function. It was effectively the day-to-day operations of the company, what made us the money. So it was very visible. And and then I think with the focus we had was what we've spoken about, which was around consulting to the business. It was around providing access to information, which was the biggest issue for a lot of our users. Wasn't so much the tools, it was just how do we get the data that we need to understand what's happening in our business. So we took a very consultative approach, and effectively I think we've been rewarded because we've now kind of gone through a reorg, and we've kind of been given expanded accountabilities, which is now kind of like half the global footprint of our organization we now have to serve. So hopefully we're not headed off a cliff and give it a couple more years and they decide to reorg. But I think it's been a positive experience to date anyway, and I don't think we're now quite central, and so there's probably not very likely that we will get cut, because we do get seen to offer a service that the business needs. So.
I think you bring up a good point too about the right people, and if you're going to do that consultative practice, to make sure that you have the right people in your BICC to do that. One of the things I see a lot is that it's like, oh, you're in charge of the BICC now, like with no practical experience on the tools, or they can't do that consultative role because they don't have that internal knowledge. And then they do things like outsource it. And now those people don't know your business, but they know the tools, and that's only part of a BICC.
I think you hit on a really good point that if you don't have people in the BICC that have the domain knowledge about how the business works in terms of the function, the day-to-day what's important to the business, speak the business terminology, then I think it's an uphill battle to be relevant to them, because you might be able to provide training on the tools, but if you can't actually speak their language and show them how do I get, you know, an outcome that they need, then you really struggle, I think, to add value.
Well, like I said, if you become a help desk, you're a BI help desk. You're not a center of excellence or a competency center. You may know the tool like the back of your hand, but without the business knowledge of how, you know, what the data going in is going to be and what the data coming out is going to be, you're a help desk, plain and simple. You know, and that's not really helping anyone except, you know, did you try turning it off and turning it back on?
Did you read
I've never seen a more effective way of killing a BI competency center than offshoring it or outsourcing it. Every time I've seen a company do that, it's been a horrendous failure. Let's see, one I can safely talk about was Harley Davidson. This is a long time ago, but they outsourced it to IBM. And so the business had to have a business justification for any new report of any kind. And so it basically just stopped any new queries dead. It took them a good few years to recover.
Just kind of off on a tangent, one of the things we've spoken about a bit is kind of self-service, and I think that's a common kind of challenge for BICCs is how do they implement a self-service practice, and especially now, you know, in the last few years, what we're also seeing is it's not only self-service BI, it's not only I want to do data discovery, it's also I want to get access to data in the corporate data stores to use for analytics projects. How do you guys kind of deal with that, or recommend customers, you know, approach that?
All right, I guess I'll go first. So how we're handling it is, you know, like I said, with a small BICOE, we've made that shift already. We've gone to being enablers, and self-service is the future. That's where we're going. Plain and simple, everything's self-service. You know, it's not my team's job to build your reports anymore. You're going to build your own reports. We're going to give you we're going to help you pick the tool that works the best for your team. Is it building a universe and using Webby? You know, is it, you know, writing your SQL and doing Crystal? Is it, do we need to send you over to our Tableau Center of Excellence because you need to do some advanced analytics? Are you only doing some analytics that aren't super difficult or are within the realm of what Microsoft's Power BI Desktop does? Then we'll help you with that. You know, as we bring in Lumera, are you on a universe and you want to visualize your universe? And we're looking to bring in Lumera for those users. We've decided that because of the nature of self-service, we can't be in the business of telling people, use this tool to do that. It's what's your need? This is the tool we think you should be using, and here's how you go ahead and use it. You know, online tutorials, paid for training, user groups, all that stuff that we really moved into. You know, I become my company Timo. I become the BI evangelist for the company. My job is to go business-wide to show people the tools, what they can do. We have user groups, we have customer stories, the whole internal BI conferences. We call it unconference. It's like TEDx for BI inside our company every year. That's all we can do is push it out and then take in the questions, because when you're as stacked as we are, self-service is the only way to do it. Because if I were to try to write every report in my company, I'd probably jump off the cliff.
Do you just with what you spoke through, Derek, do you find that the users that you support, do they get almost tool fatigue because of the number of tools, because it's kind of gone so far down the self-service route that they can choose whatever they need, and so there's always kind of like, I can use this tool, but then there's already a universe built over there, and that tool doesn't work with the universe, so then I have to rebuild that same kind of data access, and does it get a bit cluttered?
I'm lucky in the fact that no, because my users aren't that savvy yet. I'm sure they're still very siloed. I mean, so I still have thousands of users who want green bar type reports. We don't think they actually need them, but they still ask for them and build them. So as we get further down this path of self-service, I think we're going to get to that tool fatigue or paralysis by analysis of which tool I want to choose. But right now, the tools are kind of grouped for specific purposes. So when they come knocking on my door, they've got specific purpose, and we have a tool that we pretty much brick. well, brick isn't the right word. We group the tools for with enterprise architecture as well to say you should probably try this one first, and then if that works, great, and if it doesn't, then we come back and pick another one.
Okay. What about your experience, Bonnie?
I had someone who I used to work for SAP too, and so I had a friend there who built an Selfservice model that had like all of these different things you could choose from. Do you want to visualize data? Do you want to do this, that? And then had all the tools to help you pick the right tool. And I know so many people that could use that because they just don't know. Like they're trying to make the tool do something that it's not supposed to do, and then saying that, no, I can't use that, I got to go back to Excel. So I think that tool education piece is definitely a big part of it because, one, they're not experts, right? They don't know what it can do, but they can also be trying to fit the wrong tool to the job. And then that makes it look like you can't support the business in a way that you actually can if you were choosing the right tool. And as far as the data access part, I think that's the toughest part. Because once you grant that data access and self-service, depending on your other controls, they could be like sending it anywhere, right? And how do you control that? So if we use business objects, for example, you have the ability to schedule to email to PDF, you can schedule things outside of your system, and how do you control that? So I recently had a customer that has decided that they're not going to allow emails to be sent out. So they're going through and rescheduling like 1,200 schedules and getting them not to be scheduled out to email, and giving them different methods to be able to consume. And it's a huge cultural change to the way that you do things that has met with, some definite resistance in that. And, they're going as far as like, yeah, you can use BI Mobile, but you can't download to device and you can't email out. So it's a very restrictive model because it's sensitive data, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating one because you move to self-service. The biggest step is the hardest one, which is trusting the end users. Mm-hmm. And a lot of organizations, if that's not part of the culture, then that's a difficult first step. But it's essential to a self-service model. If you can't trust the users to do the right thing with the data, then you're never going to succeed. So trust, train, and verify, I think, are the three steps. So culturally, you have to make sure that the users know that they're taking responsibility, and hopefully you've got senior executives that are driving that, making sure that they only look at data that comes out of the BI system instead of somebody's random Excel spreadsheet, for example. But of course, then you have to train people. You have to make sure that they're actually able to do what you're asking them to do. And I've seen some interesting work with like driving certificates. So you have different levels of usage, and people have to pass a sort of exam or a test before they're allowed to do more complex things. So they're only allowed to open reports initially, and then as they prove that they can do that, they're allowed to add data or manipulate it a little bit more. And then finally, verification is absolutely essential. And it's one of the things that is most often missing in BI Competency Centers, perhaps surprisingly, is relatively few BI Competency Centers really do detailed analysis of who's doing what. A lot of BI Competency Centers do analysis of the hardware and software usage, but not really using analytics to promote the use of analytics.
I think that's a great point, that we need to be drinking the Kool-Aid too, right? So we have the tools at our disposal as a BICC to not only showcase what the tools can do, but also do actionable things in our BICC with that data. And the more you can lead by example, the better your environment's going to be. Plus, you get the benefit of that information. Like you said, who's using what data? Who are your most powerful users? If you look at it that perspective, those are the people that you need to tap and be out promoting your stories, like Derek was talking with his customer success stories. To do that internally is huge.
I hear EV Technologies has a good product to help you with that.
We do, actually. That's a very excellent point. Thank you very much.
This podcast is sponsored by EV Technologies. So
okay.
we have a plug in there somewhere. But interestingly, we started on this journey, and we've kind of gotten. It's one of those things. It always takes a backseat to actually project work, and so we've kind of gotten halfway, I guess, towards where we want to go in this space. But we do report on user access, like 90-day rolling average of who's using our system, number of distinct users, number of refreshes in our platform every day, like the load on the system, but also training, how many users we've trained today, report on our demand management, or our portfolio of work we're doing, who are the customers, who are the people in the team that are assigned it, through to, how many schedules are executing in our platform every day. And one of the suggestions Timo made when we had a chat earlier was around, actually reporting on, by functional area, so being able to report back to our business stakeholders per department, what their usage is, who are the people that are using their reports, because it's a self-service platform. Even who's using the export to Excel functionality versus the build in your report functionality versus, using Explorer, for example. So being able to report functionally so you can actually ascertain are people using that feature. And speaking of Explorer, we actually turned it off because people weren't using it. So we did a review and went, the audit logs show no one's using Explorer. Take that action, remove that, because we, obviously we don't have a need for it, but also, it reduces the number of tools. So there's less tools for people to be aware of as well and train in.
I think it brings you back to, too, how do you define the success of your BI Competency Center? Is it things like that where you've been able to do actionable things? Is it how many people are using the system? Is it moving from reporting to analytics? Like, how do you define that success?
I think one of the key ones for me has to be agility. I don't know how you measure it. It's not easy, but it's what kills BI competency centers. When they're not perceived as agile, that's when people reach for their own tools and start ignoring IT.
Anyone have any suggestions on how to be more agile?
Yeah.
Anything that's seeing work well?
I think that's interesting. How do you measure agility? That's a good question. Is it how many people?
That's why Timo said there's no good way of measuring it. It's all by feel, which is kind of scary in the corporate world. Does a business feel like they're being agile or being led down the agile path, and do they feel more agile, or do they still feel hamstrung by IT rules and regs? So that's I don't know if there is a good way. I mean, you can't do BI on that.
Well, actually, honestly, I think the perception, if you just did a survey and do you feel like we're getting more agile or not? I think that itself would be extremely useful. If people say you are getting more agile, then you're pretty much set. You're doing the right stuff and you're set for the future. If people don't feel like you're getting more agile, then you're probably going to have problems down the road.
One of the things we've seen. Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say one of the things we've seen is when we started out. This is a kind of an example of being agile. Is we started out and the whole IT kind of change and release process was like a monthly. You release all your software changes on a month-to-month basis, and it's scheduled. And there's full regression testing across the whole software landscape. And we actually pushed really hard and got approval to implement what we called a pre-approved change. So effectively said, hey, universes are our domain. They're in our software. They're effectively configuration, and we're going to do releases effectively whenever we want to our universes. So we'll change them in dev, we'll unit test, and we'll promote them straight to prod, and we can do that anytime we want. And there's no, remove the red tape. And effectively, we kind of got into a cadence where we started to do so much change that we actually reduced it to weekly, because weekly was what the business could live with, but it also allowed us to control the flow of those changes more effectively. So in that sense, we would measure ourselves and say, hey, we're agile, and that we've improved the agility of that kind of something that's really important to end users, I think, is that semantic layer, and actually being able to be responsive around, I need to do something to the data and I don't want to use custom SQL, I just want it to be in the universe. Well, we can add that. But now if we poll, depending on the user you poll, they might say, well, I want changes daily, and that's not something that we'll never do, because of that increases the amount of change so much that it then becomes, you spend all your time just promoting universes, doing universe work instead of actually scheduling it in on a weekly basis. So I think you also need to measure it at the right levels. If you talk to the managers, they'll be like, yeah, you kicked it out of the park, you're agile. You talk to the developers or the people who build reports who want stuff, sometimes they might have a more solid or, very specific view and maybe want agility in places where they actually won't be able to get agility anytime.
And then one big picture thing that I'm very passionate about for BI Competency Centers is that the ultimate goal is to help everybody in the organization ask better questions. That ultimately, I think the goal of a BI Competency Center is to improve the information culture of the whole organization. And it's a good thing to keep in mind, because it's very different from maintaining a technical infrastructure, which is what a lot of people define their job as, or providing reports. This is really about what can you do to change hearts and minds, change the way that people think about information. Ideally, you'd have some measure of whether the questions are getting better each year or not.
Another difficult thing to measure.
Well, you know what? But I think there's a good way to do that. And I agree with Bonnie. You know, it is difficult. But I think there's a good way of measuring that. Is back to that survey type answer that Timo was talking about. That if people are not asking, it's not even a survey. If people aren't asking you the question of how do I make a chart in Webby anymore, and they're asking the questions of how, you know, where is this data? How is this data? If they're asking the questions about the data itself in the background and where it's coming from and what they're doing with it, as opposed to how they're using the tool, then I think you've successfully migrated from, you know, the tool support to the, you know, the data enablement that Timo was just talking about. If your questions start to change, then you know you're going down the right path. That's probably the only way I can think of measuring it, if anything. Otherwise, yeah, no. It's really, really hard.
Yeah, like how sophisticated are your users, I guess, is kind of what you're looking at, right? So you're looking, are they asking those basic technical questions, or are they asking, like, what do I do with this information, and what business process can I solve with this, and taking it more to that level?
Another way to measure the success might be that it depends on the level of the organization that is using the common kind of reporting platform. So you might empower a department, and they do all their daily reporting all out of your system, but are their managers and their managers all using the same system to get kind of roll up information, or does it reach a certain level and then everything goes back to Excel and everyone kind of smashes data together and they change the numbers at a summary level because it makes their department look better? So, you know, it's I guess what level of the organization are you impacting or affecting to use the platform? And we've been going on it's definitely not, you know, fully completed yet, but, you know, we're moving into a direction where you start to automate the reports, and then so you start to get data quality issues, and, you know, the data's wrong one day because the system breaks, and so the data doesn't get into the report, and normally someone would have just re-entered the numbers manually. So that's driving the kind of culture to, you know, let's improve how our systems, you know, how robust our systems are and things like that. So that's maybe also a way to measure that.
Incredibly powerful way to ensure adoption and the right. If you've got the CEO saying, I'm not going to look at any data that doesn't come out of the system, that's a fantastic way to make sure that people are putting in the right data, that they're looking at the right reports. That's something that really can and should start from the top.
I think, Josh, you brought up a good point that it really changes the way the organization works when you start doing reporting, because usually what it points out is all the processes and procedures that are wrong or what's wrong with other software systems. And so sometimes it doesn't have the best reception in the beginning because you're really pointing out some data quality issues.
It can be very painful, but you end up fixing the data at the level that's supposed to be fixed, rather than at SAP as part of the sales pipeline. Every week, people were putting in hundreds of hours manually adjusting data at the report level to massage it to their districts and so on. And we put in a new edict that only data out of the system could be used. And all of that massaging was forced to be pushed into the lower layer so the reports could be automated. It was a big first step, but we got rid of hundreds of hours every week of make work.
And you built trust in your data, which is,
yeah.
You know, I can make a pretty analytic on anything. That doesn't mean it's worthwhile. So you got to have that trust in your data and process.
Actually, and one thing that Derek mentioned that we haven't really touched on yet, but that evangelism and communication side of things, that's another area where I find BI Competency Centers probably need to step up on average. Is that the people who work in BI Competency Centers tend to have more of a technical background, tend to understand the technology. Hopefully they understand the business too, but not necessarily the people that really enjoy going out and talking to the business and really pushing information as something they should be caring about. I'm a big believer that every BI Competency Center should have part of somebody's job be full-time evangelism.
You need a marketing plan for your BICC. It's your internal marketing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to the success of that. Is that we've gone from, when we were the larger COE and we were siloed. I was the semantic layer subject matter expert. There wasn't a whole lot of evangelism. It was, you could have a user group meeting if you want. But then when we had reorg changes and I became the head of everything, I made the conscious decision that evangelism needs to be job one, because I can't write everyone's reports. I can't solve everyone's data crunch. But my job as a COE is to bring the tools to everybody, get people to use the tools better, give them access to what they need to do their job. Because one person in the company in charge of the BI Center of Excellence wasn't going to do it all. So, part of that evangelism is it's I don't want to say it's self-serving, but by evangelizing, you're also putting the onus on the people you're evangelizing to take a vested interest and use the tools and do it right, as opposed to I'm just going to send it over to someone else to do my work for me. And
I'm
good.
So, and I'm probably naively optimistic, but I would love to see the day where the BI Competency Center really gets taken over by the BI competency community, where the community of users turns into a self-governing organization to promote best practice BI. And that if there is a BI Competency Center, it's really just helping ensure that that community survives over the long term.
I've actually seen that and seen it be successful. An organization. Well, an organization I was previously at. We had subject matter experts in the business that represented a council, and they were responsible for approving, major changes, for working together, showing each other what they're doing, and really evangelizing within that small group, and then spread it out into their business areas for how to use BI. And it was the best thing to do, is that engagement with them, because otherwise they thought it was coming from IT and wasn't that partnership. And I think that's what really made that organization successful.
That sounds fantastic. And I have to believe that that kind of organization is going to be more robust over the long term. If you have a wide, sort of broad community of interest, it's much harder for it to go away in the next reorg.
We've, I guess, tried to implement something similar, but it's kind of been at a management level. But I really like the idea of kind of like nominating, a power user within each department who then kind of comes together and represents their part of the business as well. And one of the things that's on our to-do list is to start to implement this kind of community of practice as well. So one of the things we find is we're quite good at training people. We've good, enablement, e-learning and in-person training. And then we have a good follow-up method of, kind of helping them continue their learning. But we find, because we're only a small team, is that we're still the bottlenecks. Everyone comes back to us with, how do I do this and how do I do that? And we haven't really grown that into a, here's a place, a community where all our users can work and we can support them, but they can start to help each other and start to share ideas and, kind of post a, almost like an internal Bob forum, is getting them to help each other. And I think that really would take it to the next level. And that's something that we're kind of starting to work on now.
And it's a challenge too in a global organization to have a community, right? So you have to kind of go online with your community too.
And part of it is incentives. You have to make sure that somehow in the organization, people that are using information well to help the business actually get rewarded for it. It sounds obvious, but it's not necessarily the case in a lot of companies.
No, I would agree with you 110%. It's rewards only go so far as well too. It's also a matter of how do you build that into maybe, job, depends on the reward, I should say. Some people react well to, here's a gift card for doing some things, and other people seem to react better when it appears on their scorecard and they're able to, help their own internal corporate, profile. So the reward, I think rewards are going to depend on the situation and the person, but I think that having that reward out there is, is an incentive to help and to grow, not just, I
would love to see a CEO level award every year to the best use of BI. The
innovation award.
The best used data to improve the way we do business. That would be great.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the reward part is beyond the individual. It's more about at the organization level and how you're structured and how your culture is at your company. Because I've been in companies where, you know, like a gold star was like a big deal, and like everybody wanted the gold star, and it was like kindergarten. You're very motivated by that gold star that you got next to your name, and you know, sometimes it can be as simple as that. It doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. It's just that, wow, look at how awesome they are, you know, and they get that personal sense of accomplishment. It's worth more than money, I think.
And unfortunately, this is just the mean side of me, but I would love to see the opposite, the stick, the naming and shaming of the people that use information really badly.
What, you mean the people who build really big Excel spreadsheets in Webby as data dumps?
Yep, or the people that just manipulate the data to get the numbers they want. Not that that would ever happen in our organization.
Oh, that never happens.
One of my guilty pleasures is we have like a public transport system where I live, and they have banner ads, and they put up some like infographics about how well they're doing, and you start to deconstruct these charts, and they're just like horrible, and they're just like completely, you know, they're almost doing a line chart with you know, like category axes down the bottom about feedback or something, and then they rank it so that it looks like it's it's improving as a line chart. I think like really horrible practices. You'd love to kind of like just you know, you screenshot that and share. I share it around with the team just to, you know, don't do this when you're building charts and things. So definitely that naming and shaming. I think it's good to at least share within your BICC, you know, what not to do, and look for examples of people that don't do it too well.
That's what I do at training, is like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. When you look at some of the features and capabilities and in the visualizations, I know you can make everything 3D in 800 colors, but that doesn't make it meaningful.
Well, so one of the big trends I want to mention is keeping it really simple. One thing that I find that people generally do pretty well with the power users, right? The tools are mostly designed for the power users. It's getting what most end users call self-service, is just being able to select from a range of dynamic reports that touch on their business. And it's really important to make sure that people have that. Just give a little bit of information to as many people as possible. That's what helps change the culture of the organization. And I've seen various projects where people basically build new front ends to their BI tools to try and make that as easy as possible, whether it's through SharePoint, or I saw a project where they used Outlook. They actually used Outlook and a little Outlook folder where you could go and you could click on an Excelsius model that would take you to the reports you needed. But in both cases, it was all about just getting 1 or 2 clicks access to basic reporting was a big part of changing the hearts and minds.
One of the things, we're nearly at the top of the hour, so one of the things I just wanted to finish on was, you know, there's a real big push at the moment in the industry around big data and advanced analytics and you know, supporting data science projects. And I think the trend is to exclude BICCs from those. And I really wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on how BICCs can make sure that there's alignment between what happens at an operational reporting level through to supporting analytics, through to data science, and making sure there's consistency in terms of how we approach that. So I think that's something that, you know, we're kind of going back to the throw everything out, start again, you know, then we're going to spend 80% of our time on, you know, cleansing data and integrating data. And, you know, hopefully we've solved a lot of those challenges with BICCs. So anyone have any thoughts on that?
Well, so one thing that's happening is that self-service is going a level deeper. People don't want self-service access to data. They want self-service creation of their own data marts and data warehouses or data lakes. So the data scientists in the organization really do need those massive data stores. But I'm a big believer that that should be provided as an infrastructure by IT. They shouldn't allow a project that's completely separate from what's going on. It should be hosted by IT. And then the same kind of analytics going on. So you can actually at least see what people are doing and spot any parallels between what people are trying to do with the data lakes and the advanced analysis, and see if there's any overlap with what's going on with the sort of quote-unquote core systems. But as you said, too often it's a completely different organization. And the new organization often is providing great value, but has no idea about the sort of governance limitations that IT is very good at. And then IT sometimes just is a bit too stuck in the old way of doing things. It doesn't really see why business people would want more of that agility. So absolutely, it has to be, again, community. If everybody should be working together to make it the best for everybody.
Yep, Timo nailed it.
Yeah, I don't know what to add to that.
Yeah, he nailed it. That is what we should be aspiring to, and I think most companies are trying to get there. So that's rather than horror stories and whatnot, we should leave it on that, because that's exactly the goal of where we should be getting to, is that partnership and the whole 9 yards.
Good call, Derek. So yeah, I think it is a good point to wrap up. It's been a really good conversation. I feel like we could probably talk for another hour. So maybe we'll have to have a round two if anyone, any of our dedicated fan base is interested in a round two. So thanks very much, guys, for joining us tonight. Really appreciated your time and the opportunity to have a chat about BICCs. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
This podcast is hosted and sponsored by EV Technologies. Visit us on the net at savethecms.com.
DSLayer!